the key message of 2023 is the guy with AI is going to beat the guy without AI. Like that person who has adopted AI is just going to be faster and quicker and more efficient and more effective and more importantly, be able to process at scale.
Welcome to the Next Insights podcast, intersecting science, technology, and consciousness. I'm your host, Michael Morrissey, strategic futurist and founder of Next CoLabs. This podcast explores the transformative potential of generative AI and its many applications for personal, professional, and business growth. Join us where we celebrate the next insights, those aha moments that shift your point of view and open the door into the next paradigm. You'll hear the latest ideas and thought-provoking conversations with industry experts, authors, thought leaders, equipping you with the strategies to harness the relentless pace of change in the AI era. Whether you're a CEO, leader, or interested in personal growth, this podcast will give you the insights to leverage AI to amplify human potential and consciously shape the future for humanity first. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Next Insight podcast. Today, I'm excited to have Roy Vella, the CEO of Next CoLabs, join me to talk about how CEOs can adapt to the AI era and continuous change. Welcome to the show, Roy. So excited to have you here. And tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Happy to join you. Let's see, background. So I'm an inner city Brooklyn kid, although I won't go back that far. But yeah, that is true. So I'm born and raised in New York. I got about a dozen years each, New York, San Francisco, London, and now I'm about half a dozen outside of Boston. I went to California for grad school, so was fortunate enough to go to Stanford for JD MBA. Graduated and started a fintech company with some classmates. We sold that, dabbled in investing for a bit, and then got pulled into the early days of PayPal. PayPal sent me to London. That's how I ended up there, and came back with a different company in the smart home IoT space. All that is sort of background to say that I'm a deep tech guy. I'm a tech geek. I've always been deep into science. My wife likes to joke around that I'm an inch deep but a mile wide in most of science, that I can talk to any scientist solidly for 15 minutes and they're very impressed, but then very soon I'll hit a cliff and that'll be the end of that. So that's me in a nutshell. And at the moment, CEO of Next CoLabs, fortunate enough to cross paths with you and the crew, what is it now, a year and a half ago-ish? And been swimming at the bottom of the AI pool for that time and excited about what 2024 brings in that.
You wrote an article on our Insights page, and we'll put something in the show notes relative to that. It was called Exponentials Everywhere.
Sure.
Maybe that's a good place to start in terms of just giving us your POV on what the heck happened in 2023, starting in late November 2022, what we call the AI moment. Exponentials everywhere. What's happening?
It's interesting to me. So an exponential curve, if people aren't familiar, is very flat for a very long time. And then you hit an elbow and it goes very vertical. And what that means experientially is that for a very long time, not much is happening, right? Like AI as a space of study and research, started in the 40s and 50s, really. And for a very long time, we're on that exponential curve and it's pretty gradual and not much is happening. And what really happened in 2023, end of 2022 and through 2023 was we entered the elbow and things got exciting very quickly as things started to go vertical. And part of it is scale. So I tell people often, what's really happened is we've had big data and scale processing that finally have collided in a way where we have enough processing power to extract the signal from the noise. And that's really the quantum shift. And it's not just, we experience it in LLMs and generative art and all that kind of thing. But the reality is it's happening throughout all of science. We discovered the first antibiotic in 60 years as a result of this scale processing and big data, right? So it's AlphaFold. We folded basically all the protein folding combinations that are possible. We hear about chess and Go, but it's happening everywhere, right? It's this scale processing and it's about entering the elbow and going vertical on the exponential curve.
In terms of like CEOs, they're so busy and they're so focused on quarterly returns. And all of a sudden you had the AI moment. And, in our own community and our own company, we study up on this 3 times a week as a community and as a group. I would say we're like a super powered AI powered company and organization and community. How do you explain to a CEO what just happened in terms of exponential? Now, I'm a Canadian. I think of it almost like a hockey stick moment, right? We just went vertical.
Yeah.
So I think we've passed through this sort of threshold from, a one-time disruption, perhaps in the lifetime of a company, to continuous disruption, continuous change. If I was CEO, how would you explain that to me so that I can begin to kind of wrap my brain around this?
Yeah, I would say that technological change has been happening in curves and plateaus, right? We're very used to that sort of S curve, we call it, right? It comes in, it goes up, it flattens out, then it goes up and it flattens out. There's a continuous gradual S curve as new technologies come to the fore. The computer, software generation in Word, the mobile phone, like higher rates of connectivity, things get adopted slowly, they go up, and then the curve flattens off, and you have a little period of respite between the technology waves. And what's really happened is that those curves have sort of flattened. So instead of going up and flat, it's getting smoother, right? So that the curve over time is what it feels like is much, much quicker innovation. What's really happening is that the adoption. So for instance, OpenAI going to 100 million users in less than a year in a number of months is because of all of the prior curves, right? So it's people are technology literate. They have a mobile device at high speed, which has high processing. Like all these things are compounding so that when a new thing comes out, and that keeps happening when Facebook released and then WhatsApp and, the growth of these companies is because of a mesh network of connectivity and processing power that is everywhere. AI, I would say, in the last year is the tidbit at the end of that curve, right? It's almost at the end of the bullwhip. And by the way, it's not the end, but it's the latest, right? So it will continue, but that is the latest of the curves that we're experiencing. And that's why it feels different, because the adoption was so quick. And also it's a very, very different kind of software.
If I was to say, okay, is this a hype cycle, Roy? Like, how would you explain this moment? It looks like it behaves very differently than a typical hype cycle.
Yeah, I don't think it's a hype cycle for a variety of reasons. One is, while we say it's a new technology, it's really a new experience, right? So as I said, we've been doing AI for a long time. What's happened is we can do it at scale. And not only that, but this is not a new technology like prior technologies where I needed to train you. Like I needed to explain to you, here's the menu bar, hit the button, this drops down, now hit that expands out, now go down. Like there's literally a box. Like it's a chat box, and all of us who use any sort of technology know how to chat. We know how to type into a field, right? So there isn't a training curve in that regard where this new technology, when I got my Palm Pilot, I had to learn a new stylus cursive, right? Like when new software comes out, I have to learn how the menus work and what is vectors and blah, 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 right? With this technology, that's not that, right? So at the foundation, it is very simple. It's conversational. It's easy to adopt. And the real challenge is to do something useful with all that white space, right? So all of a sudden, it's more about the questions you pose and how you pose them than it is some skill set per se. And so I don't think it's going away. If anything, it's going to get better and better and more powerful. I think part of the problem at the moment is that we landed on the wrong A and we landed on the wrong I. So the term artificial intelligence is old. I mean, I think the first time it was used was in like the 40s or 50s. Artificial implies fake, not real, insubstantial. And intelligence implies smart, correct, clever. Neither of those is the case for LLMs at the moment. It's more like augmented imagination, right? It's enhanced. It's not artificial in any way. And it's more imaginative, right? I mean, I hate the word hallucination. People keep saying, oh, it's hallucinating. Hallucinating implies that it's seeing something that's not there. That is not what it's doing. It's being creative. And again, a scale problem. It is choosing the next most likely word given all prior words. Like that's a scale. We can't really conceive what that means, but that's what it's doing. It's a probabilistic word prediction model that is giving you the next most likely word given all other words that it has been trained on. And again, scale. Our intuition as humans around scale is just bad. We are not, I prove it very quickly to people. I say, think about a million, a billion, a trillion in seconds. So a million seconds, it's about 12 days. A billion seconds, 32 years. Trillion seconds, 32,000 years, right? So, and it's English's fault. English makes million, billion, trillion feel very linear, but it's times 1,000. Again, it's a very sort of exponential curve. And so when, OpenAI or any of the LLM foundation models talk about that they have trillions of data points, that's basically inconceivable. As a human, now, frankly, that's pretty much how we work. Our neural network is very similar to that, but that's not how we think of ourselves.
The hallucination problem is something that we discussed in our thought leadership community at Next Collective. We did a panel discussion with 5 luminaries in the AI kind of space. And I think, I love the way you describe hallucination to folks, that you say it's a feature, not a problem. And I would say we're also simultaneously, the thought that comes to me is, Kahneman's idea of thinking fast and slow, and that really the hallucination piece is like phase 1 of, AI and its evolution, that it's thinking fast. And it's sort of like the unconscious or the non-conscious. It doesn't go right or wrong. It just is. And so, we're not getting those highly sort of reasoned, evidence-based outputs that we might want, but actually hallucination is what makes it very creative at this moment. Talk a bit about I would say this is a quote from you, hallucination is a feature.
Right. Well, it is augmenting your imagination. I have had many experiences, as have you in our group, where the AI comes up with something new, something creative, something different than I would have anticipated, right? And, that is a feature of large scale processing on effectively all human knowledge, right? It's trained on, trillions of data points, right? And so the perspectives are interesting and different than a human might correlate, right? I also think, part of it is that we perceive AI as both very human and very not human, right? So it does things that we go, that doesn't feel right. There's something about that wasn't correct. And yet on the flip side, there's all these fascinating things that are happening with LLMs now, where if you treat it as a human, so for instance, if you encourage it, I know you can do this. You've done this for me before. You're so great at this. If you tell it to think step by step, tell it to take a breath, tell it to deeply consider. There's all sorts of interactions now. Ethan Mollick, this professor who posts a lot in this world, there's a whole bunch of behavioral elements of the large language models that are bizarre. They're a little odd. Why does it behave differently and better when I compliment it? Right? It doesn't have a personality per se. And yet how you phrase things is very important. Telling it to take a breath and think step by step ends up in a different result, which, is kind of mind boggling, but also kind of not. It is a neural network, right? That has been trained, not dissimilar. Dissimilar in that it's, it's being sourced by everything, but it's being trained and it is learning, right? And so it's a strange, I think the fascinating part coming up, which is getting a bit esoteric, but we're going to have to start to really decide what it means to be human. What is human? What is consciousness? What is sentience? These are bigger questions than the commercial questions that you wrestle with as a CEO, but they're important, valid questions, because we passed the Turing test and nobody blinked. The Turing test was in place for 60 years, 50, 60 years, where we go, well, once you can interact with a computer and you can't tell if it's human or computer, then we've reached a real boundary line. We just blew right over that. And nobody said boo. We haven't even come up with a new test yet. What is the difference? And I think that's where, Yuval Harari and some of those thinkers have valid points. Our operating system is storytelling, and we've done it for hundreds of thousands of years, if not more. And it's the foundation of everything. It's the foundation of economics, of politics, of religion. You pick a topic. Telling the best story, that's what wins. And all of a sudden, we've made an alien intelligence, as Yuval says, that tells a pretty mean story. So that's interesting. But as a tool, that would be great, right? I give it all the information I have about me, about my competitors, about my products, about my services. And I say, tell me a story about that. Fantastic. That's unbelievable. That's a totally new way of generating work product.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way with this technology, the opportunities are just obviously massive. And at the same time, the existential threat is a reality. And so suddenly ethics is now kind of front and center, something that was never really discussed. Or even the idea of philosophy, or you say consciousness. These things are now coming into the foreground. In some ways, our technology is pushing us to really look at ourselves and to claim consciousness as something that's very special about being human.
Yeah.
That our subjectivity is the special sauce. We can't really measure it from a neuroscience point of view. And yet it's that sort of, it's the mystery that is the specialness that makes us human. And I think if, for a CEO, beyond just the sort of functioning of the company, to kind of get up to the bigger picture, the vision, zoom out and see the very big picture and realize that this is what is required, especially to work with AI in a very safe way and steer it safely. Yeah. That's very important. Maybe talk a bit about that, there's a lot of fear in the C-suite.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a bit ironic or amusing that, when robots were taking manufacturing jobs, wasn't a lot of debate about it, wasn't a lot of discussion, in Silicon Valley and in the world centers that I've lived in New York and San Francisco and London, robots taking some manufacturing jobs. There wasn't much discussion about the existential risks of that. All of a sudden, LLMs come for knowledge economy jobs and people are like, whoa, time out. Like the lawyers, right? The lawyers and the creatives and the artists. And we have so many roles that, both the visual and verbal, the output of LLMs is pretty amazing, right? And all of a sudden there is this threat vector where people feel like, oh crap, like this is bad for me. I don't feel like that at all. I feel that this is a thought partner, right? We have an extended RAM to our own creativity where we're able to now, again, do things at scale that we couldn't do before. Do things quicker than we couldn't do before. Like, am I worried about my calculator doing, long division and multiplication better than me? No, not really. Like, I'm happy that I have that tool. This is yet another tool to extend the ability for productivity, right? I don't think it's a human replacement at all. I think it's a human enhancement. It frees us up, first of all, for a higher level task, right? So I like to say, there's augmentation at the top of the stack where it helps me co-create, it helps me co-write, it helps me author, it helps me do things that take some mind power. And it also is an automation process. So it helps me take away the things that I really don't want to do. Like, someone has to take the meeting notes, someone has to write the next steps, someone has to, record the call and dissect it and give me the highlights. Like someone has to do the RFPs for the new clients that are 80% the same, right? Like, at the moment, we had a lot of tasks that were automated by humans because there was no one else. Now we don't really need to do that. I free up those same humans who were doing higher value, more productive tasks to do those things and to apply their brain power. I have 3 teenagers and I tell them, look, what AI can do for you is go off of the blank page to something. We humans, we're pretty opinionated. We're good at editing. Oh, I like that. I don't like this. The countless hours of staring at a blank page, that's over. That's over. I just feed the AI the context that it needs to get the ball rolling. It does the hard push of beginning the momentum. If you turn that in, again, what I tell my teenagers, if you give the AI something, it spits it out and you turn it in, you're probably going to get a C, C plus, maybe a B minus, It gets you 80, is on the 80-20, it'll get you 80% totally. There. But the 20% is the part that makes it real and yours and you own it. It gets rid of the busy work and it leaves you to do all the refining and the enhancement and the creativity to make it personalized and yours and frankly good. And that's the same in the workspace, whether it's academic or work environment. I think, we now have a new thought partner that is not human, that can be very, very helpful to augment our creative output and to automate our less creative output, but necessary. Like the necessary evil stuff gets done by a bot. By the way, you still have to read it. You still have to review it. You still have to say, no, actually, in the end, Bob's going to do that, not Roy or whatever. But, it takes the bulk of that stuff and automates it for you, makes it easier. And frankly, that's what happened in the manufacturing floor as well. The bots did the repetitive tasks that are literally damaging to humans, and the humans refined. We are good refining, editing, opinionated
Curating.
creatures. Yeah, it's for us to create.
Taking a quick break from this week's episode to tell you how to get even more free insights on AI, science, technology, and consciousness delivered straight to your inbox. Sign up for the Next CoLabs newsletter, where we unpack the latest in AI every Wednesday. When you subscribe, you get the insights from myself, Gary Bowles, and our team of experts at Next CoLabs. We're sharing what we're discussing, thinking, and reading weekly in the world of AI. Why join? We're not about filler. We strive to offer high-value content to keep you on the leading edge of the AI era. We have our finger on the pulse and want to share that with you and keep you posted on our free panel discussions and events. It's your weekly touch point to staying ahead of the curve. Click the link below in the show notes and sign up for the Next CoLabs newsletter. Now, back to the episode. At the scale of an organization or a company, we talk about this at Next CoLabs, the vision that we want to deliver and implement for companies is this idea of an AI-powered company.
Yeah.
So we get to play with, I think, heretofore in, cultural history, we've had lots of shifts, big shifts, but this one is very unusual in that we know it's happening and that we get to play with before and after, like in this moment. It's quite remarkable. So before AI, you're a company. As you pass through this threshold, post AI, after AI, the promise is that my company could be an AI powered organization. Tell me a bit about that. Like you've talked about individuals and the 80-20 and how, we become curators and
sure,
we steer it and kind of bring our subjectivity and our unique kind of ability to it. In some ways too, that's the promise of the organization, is that as this kind of comes in and augments your workforce, you can now kind of surface their unique abilities and they're not so kind of weighed down by the heavy lift of the 80. AI takes care of that. And so what is the promise of an AI sort of powered organization as a sort of horizontally augmenting your workforce, vertically finding automations to kind of like, in a sense, automate your core business processes or pipelines?
Yeah, I do believe that it is about having a practice around AI, right? This is something that is a new tool that will enable enhanced productivity, enhanced efficiency and effectiveness. And it will be something that will take some time to embed into organizations. They need to play with it, first of all, and practice with it. And unlike prior technical skills, as I said before, this isn't about fluency in a menu system or, being able to grab corners of boxes and drag things around, right? Like this is a new kind of conversation between you and a non-human entity on creatively getting things done. And inside organizations, think of it this way. If I had a bunch of employees and I was, working with them and talking to them, and I see, Susie over there on her laptop and she brought it to the meeting and Joe brings in his typewriter, I'm going to look at Joe and go, Joe, what's up? Like what's with the stack of paper and the typewriter? Like, we had this other tool. It's much easier to correct and it's also not as loud and you don't have to feed the paper in and blah, blah, blah. Like, not that things don't, we still have paper and pencil. There are reasons that writing longhand is good for some roles and some objectives and some experiences. But over time, we adopt these new things because they make us better. They make us more efficient and effective. I think what we're going to see very clearly is that the key message of 2023 is the guy with AI is going to beat the guy without AI. Like that person who has adopted AI is just going to be faster and quicker and more efficient and more effective and more importantly, be able to process at scale. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So at the moment, I have employees who have access to all of the information that the company has, but in a very inaccessible way. They have to know where to look. They have to know who to ask. It's really quite difficult in any scaled organization of 50, 100, forget it if you get to thousands, you have a massive source of incredible experience and data that's basically inaccessible. But if it was written in a document at any point, in an email, in a PDF, in an exchange on text or whatever, at the moment, I could just say to the AI, who do we have who's ever had experience with blah? And by the way, the other thing I should say is, it's not like all your employees have been there since you launched. Employees are turning over all the time, right? So I assume that, most companies at this point in our evolution, 80% of our employees weren't there at the launch, probably less, it's probably like 90% are new, it means that there are experiences and things that just people aren't aware of. But I could have a resident AI who is fully aware of everything we've ever done, who has full access. Again, going back to the original thing, big data, scale processing. In the past, I had to know where to look. I had to phrase my question correctly. I had to use correct search terms. Now I can just say to the AI, we got this RFP for this new project. What have we done that is anything like that? Goes out, checks everything we've ever done, looks at it and goes, here are the top 5 projects that apply to this project. Holy crap. That's one of the things I love about Watson, IBM Watson, which shook the world but didn't shake it to the extent as the LLMs have now. But, Watson's best application became reading medical journal papers for a long time. Why? Well, this is the deal. I'm a neurosurgeon of this part of the brain. If I just read the papers published in my subspecialty, I would have no time to eat or sleep, never mind do surgery. So the application that they did for Watson back then was go read all the papers. Here's my patient. Here's my diagnosis. What papers should I look at? And Watson went and said, here's the top 5 papers. Go to page 72, chapter 6. Told me exactly what to read for the cutting edge science on my subspecialty. Brilliant. LLMs just give that to everybody. So I think, it's going to be transformative in the workplace. I don't think, people are worried, oh, it's going to take my job. I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. It's going to make you more productive, happier, faster, and focused on the things you love to do and doing the things you don't love to do, which is, who doesn't want that? Right?
Okay. So if I was the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company and I asked you, okay, so how would I implement this? Like, how would I augment and sort of superpower my workforce? Because I see a much more bigger picture as a CEO. I'm a visionary. I want to take my company through this threshold and 10x, 100x my company, move it maybe from a car company to a mobility company, go through that kind of transformation. That's what we're talking about here. This is a transformation moment by applying AI. And also on the vertical dimension, the automation, do apply a dev team to go in and kind of carefully do an assessment, so horizontally augmenting, vertically automating. How do we do that? How can I do that? I'm the CEO.
Yeah, no, I think the out of the gate answer is encouragement, right? So, you need to encourage and make available to your team the type of tools that you want them to be using, right? It really depends on the organization. So, hell, if you're already a Microsoft house, fine, use Copilot, right? If you're a Google house, fine, use Gemini. If you're neither, maybe you prefer ChatGPT 4V and OpenAI. So what you're doing and how you're doing things already applies in some way, but really it's about getting people to play with it. So on the creative side, on the augmentation side, you need people to start to think about, you want them to want to have a new thought partner in the room who enhances the output of the room. They need to start to think about AI as a new addition to the team that just makes everybody's life better, and it increases everybody's speed and it gets rid of the busy work. It gets rid of, the tedium and gives them more time to do what they want to do, which is why they took the job, this kind of thing. I think the automation is a bit more complicated. There is some dev in that regard. You'll have what we like to call business intelligence reengineering. You'll have someone come in and help the team and watch the team do the tedious things that they do and say, okay, where can we apply AI to just skip those 10 steps? So you'll go from step 1 to step 11 immediately by asking the AI to fill in this form, asking the AI to do, whatever the particular tasks are. That's a bit more technical than the other, where, as I said, there is a text field and it's about learning how to interact effectively with that text field. I think the other thing that's interesting to me is context, right? So, I walk up to a stranger and I have sort of a middle way of interacting with them. But if I'm interacting with my brother, that's different. If I'm interacting with a classmate from business school, that's different. If I'm interacting with a CEO of a Fortune 500, right? So there's a whole bunch of context that changes my interaction based on who I'm interacting with. AI is the same thing, right? So the more context that I can give the AI, here's who I am. Here's who you are. Here's a bunch of PDFs and information about who we are. Here's who the client is. Like, the more you enrich the interaction, the better the output. And that takes a lot of practice. I've noticed that that's hard for people to get their heads around, that the AI, when you walk up to it, is generic. It's bland, it's blank. It really doesn't know how to interact with you. So how does it interact with you? As if you and it are the mean. But the reality is not that. You are you have your experiences, your education, your life, etc. And you can make it whatever you want to make it. People are like, how are we getting these LLMs to talk to me as if they're Einstein, or talk to me as if they're Plato, or, talk to me as if they're Marie Curie? Like, well, because it knows everything it needs to know about Marie Curie. All I have to tell it is, guess what? You're Marie Curie. And lo and behold, so this is it's part of the magic that we have getting our head around, is that I can actually make the LLM anything I want it to be. I just tell it that's what you are. In this interaction, for this client, I need you to be the most creative art director that has ever lived. And and here's their prior art, and here's what I would like to see, blah, blah, blah. So, context, right? The two words I think are most important: context and iteration. One of our colleagues, Brad, he's brilliant at that. He'll be interacting with the AI and he just writes 3 words: tell me more. And then he goes, that's interesting. Expand on that. Like, blah, blah, blah. Just the iterative back and forth alone. So, setting context and iterating, it's a world of difference. And if you want to upgrade your entire workforce in that regard, it's going to sound funny, but you got to encourage them to play. They got to be willing to interact. There's no mistakes. You're not going to break it. Do what you want.
And this is where your idea of practice sort of kicks in. And, maybe you can make a distinction between Next CoLabs as a strategy house versus, I think this comes with you as the CEO of Next CoLabs, this idea of practice, practicum, of something that we're in an era where, post the sort of AI moment, change is now continuous. Every week there's an update. And if you're working with like the ChatGPT 3.5, like, you've missed the boat, right?
Yeah.
It does image generation. It's doing all these things, like, every week something happens. So how do I, as a CEO, embrace this sort of concept of practice? You and I talked about this earlier in the week, about this notion of a CoLab that gets instantiated inside your company as a third space to have a kind of like a place where you have almost like going to the gym, and you're continuously training up on these tool sets to like take your workforce to the next level. And also, I'll also add this other word that's really important to this conversation is, I think collaboration plus AI is the new MO that's on offer here.
Exactly. So I often say to folks, Olympians go to the gym the next day. It doesn't matter what happened at the Olympics, they keep practicing, right? Mastery is asymptotic. You never quite get there. You're always trying to get there. And that requires practice. And, I love the phrase Next CoLabs as a term, because collab says everything I needed to say. It's collaboration, first of all. It's it's together. And it's lab. A lab is a place of practice. In a lab, it's experiential and it's iterative and it's contextual, and it's where you go to practice your art. Whether you're a chemist, a physicist, whatever kind of scientist you are, you go to the lab to put your ideas into practice. And that's exactly what AI is about, is putting ideas into practice, right? And it's a continual effort, a continual practice. And because of, exactly as you said, the innovation curve and exponentiality of it all, you have to keep it up. You have to keep it up. You can't, again, my kids recognize that they're runners. One of their sports is running, and they notice, like, if they stop, they regress. It only takes a week of not running to like lose time, right? And so this is very similar to that. It is, I think you said it correct. It's not unlike putting a gym in your office. It is having a collab space in your office. This is a mental gym in your office where you go with your thought partner and you train. And you train and you practice and you see what works and you see what doesn't work. And it evolves over time, right? There's a continual state. The people who play with it, who practice with it, are the ones who are going to be most fluent and most able to get the work products out that they want. And so, so all of those things, Next CoLabs is not at all about a strategy document or conceptual theory. It's about putting AI into practice such that it's second nature, and also such that you would never go back. I tell people the best way to understand AI, solve a problem as you would in the past. AI doesn't exist. Now solve a problem with AI, but a clean AI. Just open AI and ChatGPT and say, here's my problem, help me solve it. The third way, go to OpenAI or whatever your LLM of choice is and say, here's who I am. Here's who you are. Here's a whole bunch of information about this problem set and the client and the background. Here's everything we've ever done solving similar problems. Now help me solve this problem. Those three experiences are so starkly different that once you experience number three and you go, oh my God, like an AI with context. If I said to you right then, sorry, I'm taking it away. Oh my God, you'd lose it. You'd be like, what? No, I need that. Like, I can't, you would never go back to solving problems the original way. It would be like me taking your calculator away. I'm like, sorry, you got to do all this longhand. To get a pencil, get a piece of paper. I'm sorry, I'm going to need that calculator back. People would have a fit. And that's what AI is at the moment. AI is at a point where it's just like, once you experience it and once you really have enough practice to get value out of it, you'll never go back. It would be unimaginable.
This is where we have that sort of, before and after is like just compressed, like time just gets compressed. It's like we went from horse and buggy to car in this AI moment,
right? Where
we went, there's human and then there's augmented humans with intelligence.
Yeah. Except we went from horse and buggy to Ferrari.
Yeah. And I mean, horse and buggy to car, that happened probably over about a 50-year period before that. We still had dirt roads in Manhattan at the turn of the century, in the 20th century, where, it was a quasi sort of state. We are like before and after it's compressed. Just to finish up on one aspect, again, from a CEO's point of view, relative to hallucination and the third part of your triadic description of, before, during, and after, or even like old, new, and next. Next is you got context. And it starts to get sturdy and you can start to steer it, and it starts to create safety and guardrails. And then, evidence-based starts to plug in, like we're moving from thinking fast to thinking slow. And so if 2023 was the year of, I would say, thinking fast, just kind of like burst on the scene, huge creative explosion, like the Cambrian moment. Now here we are. And talk about RAG and just how some of this is going to start to think slow. And I think from a CEO's point of view, this could be like the answer to it being much more sturdy.
So we have all been trained for 20, 30 years, depending on when you got on board, in a query response world. There's a box, I ask a question, I get a response. It's basically a database search. I mean, Google is searching the database of the internet to try and answer your query through someone else's words. The biggest complaint about ChatGPT was I asked it a question and it gave me the wrong answer. It's in no way designed to give you the right answer. Like, nothing about its design. As I said, it's a word at a time story. It is a probabilistic verbal model giving you the next best word based on all prior words. Accuracy be damned. It has nothing to do with accuracy. And it doesn't know how to cut and paste either. Like, if you ask it for a specific thing, it can't cut and paste. That's not in the design. Well, that's kind of a problem. And that's where the whole hallucination came up. People said, it lied to me. It told me something that wasn't true. It said Roy went to Harvard and he went to Stanford, and it said that he lived in New Jersey and he lived in blah, blah, blah. Because what it's giving you is proximate. It's not giving you actual, right? RAG is a acronym for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And that term refers to taking an LLM who's very creative, as I said originally, augmented imagination, plus a knowledge graph. So here are actual facts. Here's actual knowledge that we have. And you add them together. So an LLM comes up with something and the knowledge graph goes, no, that's wrong. It's 18%, not 16%, whatever. The combination of an LLM and a knowledge graph is a RAG. And that's where we're headed, right? Where all of a sudden I'm going to start to have an interaction with LLMs that has been validated. In fact, we often say knowledge graph validator. It is validating the information that the LLM has presented. I mean, it exists in some sense. I mean, perplexity.ai is basically like a replacement search engine using AI, and it cites its sources. It has an LLM contextual ability to interact, but then it validates the knowledge that it's sharing and says, here's the sources where I got that knowledge. A pure LLM that doesn't have a validator will probably go away, or you'll probably have to request it specifically. You'll probably have to say, don't worry about validating, just get creative with me in the future. Not right now. Right now, it's very creative and it says whatever it wants to say. I don't think it's hallucinating. It's just being creative. I mean, this is the other miracle to me. This is iPhone 1.0. I actually have my iPhone 1.0. It was a bad phone. It was bad across the piece. Like, it wasn't a good computer. It wasn't a good phone, but it was magic compared to everything on the market at that point. You were like, oh my God, like this is a totally new way of interacting with technology. If I compare my iPhone 1 with, iPhone 15, there's no comparison. We are at AI 1.0. The magic we're seeing right now is as bad as AI will ever be, right? So it's almost hard to fathom. We're at the beginning stages of this, where the scale of processing, quantum computing, like there's a whole bunch of trends that are going to merge together where it's hard to imagine. Even as imaginative and as futuristic as you might think you are, no one is really going to be able to conceive sort of what comes next in that regard. And I tell folks, like, if you're not getting on the treadmill now, you need to, because it's fast and moving faster. If the treadmill at the airport is going a particular speed and you get on and it's comfortable, great. But as it speeds up, it gets harder and harder to get on, right? Like, without falling over, right? So I think we're at an amazing inflection point. I think there's a ton of competition. I mean, people talk about the big 3, 4 foundational models, but there are hundreds of LLMs now. You can install LLMs locally, not only in an organization, but on a laptop, right? Like, we are getting to the point where the magic is going to continue. And by the way, it's not magic, it's science. It just feels like magic because it's so new and so unique to us. I guess the last thought I would leave you with is, I believe soon, within 3 to 5 years, each of us will have a persistent personal AI. And persistent is the important word. I will have an AI that sees what I see, hears what I hear, reads what I read, and is extended RAM for my life experience. And I'll be able to say to that AI, hey, I was on that ski lift in Whistler and I met that guy and we had that quick chat and he brought up a book. Remember, he was from France. And my AI will say, yes, that was Pierre from Paris, and he brought up that book that was blah, blah, blah. Would you like me to buy it? And I'll say, yes, I would like you to buy it. Thank you. I forgot to do that. Right? So, and I'm giving you an example of like a casual thing. That's for everything, for work, for whatever. Never mind when you add an augmented reality layer on top of it, right? That overlays. I'm a fan of Stealing Worlds, but I would recommend that book to anyone who wants to know what the near future could look like with augmented reality and blockchains and self-sovereign identity and AR and AI. And it's fascinating.
Absolutely amazing conversation, Roy. And I called it the Next Insights podcast because usually at the very end, I mean, insights is what really I have those aha moments. You go, I can't go back. I just had a thought that changed the way my trajectory going forward. And You've discussed that several times in this session. I think the one that sort of really comes through strongly is this is the worst that AI will be. Like that's a massive insight, right? So I really appreciate you surfacing that and sharing that with our audience. So just for our audience, where can we find you if I'm a CEO and I want to get in touch with you now? What's
Sure.
the best place to kind of reach you?
Yeah, nextcolabs.io. Just Roy at nextcolabs.io is good. Roy Vella at anything. So Roy Vella on LinkedIn, Roy Vella at Gmail. You pick it. I have a fairly unique name. And if you don't end up getting me, you'll probably get my dad. so he knows where to find me.
I love that. Great conversation. And just so everyone knows, one of Roy's favorite business books is the book Drive by Daniel Pink. And it's all about I motivation or intrinsic motivation. And we hosted that book and Roy led it, a kind of a 2-hour session in our thought leadership community this past week. And we're going to jump on another podcast very soon. And we're going to take a deep dive into AMP. And if once you get to know Roy, you're going to find out that he uses the concept of AMP a lot, which is autonomy, mastery, purpose. So stay tuned. We're going to find out more about why Roy thinks that this is, by the way, this is the first 3 of 5 core principles or our pillars at Next CoLabs: autonomy, mastery, purpose, flow, and collaboration. And add AI to all of those. And are you ready to become an AI-powered company? Join us at Next CoLabs. All the best, Roy, and beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Insights podcast. If you enjoy this episode, take a screenshot and share it with a friend. And if you really love the podcast, head over to wherever you're listening and leave a rating or a review. This helps our show get in front of more people interested in shaping the future of science, technology, and consciousness. Finally, to receive even more insights on what we're discussing, thinking, and reading at Next CoLabs, sign up for our weekly newsletter by clicking the link in the show notes. I'll talk to you next week, but until then, consciously embrace disruption, my friends.